Hi again, everybody. This is Gary Cubetta here at 57am.com. And with me today, early in the morning here in Scottsdale, Arizona, is the world-famous Leaping Lanny Poffo. Lanny, a pleasure to have you with us.
I am the genius, the world's smartest man. I prefer to remember myself as long as I'm living in the past. Instead of remembering myself as a suffering hero, I prefer to be the nemesis of the great Hulk Hogan.
Absolutely. Saturday night's main event, right?
Can you believe it's going to be 20 years? Thanksgiving? That's when it aired. We performed it on October 31st and 1989. And it was just, if I'm going to live in the past, let me live there. For being a jabroni for 21 years was worth it to be 4 months the electron of the great nucleus Hulk Hogan.
Well, you know, Lanny, I think to some of us older wrestling fans like myself, I remember you when you came up. You worked hard for a long time, and then you finally got your chance with the World Wrestling Federation. And, you know, you will always be remembered as the genius by most modern-day fans.
That's right, and I'll tell you what, if the fans are interested, I'll tell you how that all came about.
Well, we're going to get to all that, Lanny, but I want to start off with how you began in the world of professional wrestling. A lot of our customers are a little bit older. They like to hear about some of the history from the 1970s. Is that fine?
Yes, I graduated high school in 1973, but my brother graduated in 1971. He was ignored in the Major League Draft, and he signed as a free agent with the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, I also had a dream to play baseball, but, sometimes the dream, you have to wake up. Too much random eye movement or something. So I realized I wasn't going to make it, so I decided, after I wasn't drafted, I decided not to try to be a free agent, and I went right into wrestling. The problem is, of course, my father is Angelo Poffo, meaning that we didn't have to pay anybody to train us. And I'm afraid that there's a lot of sharks in the water, and there's a lot of money changing hands with very speculative, in other words, they're not getting a lot of bang for their buck. Then you have to ask yourself, if this guy's so great and knows so much, why isn't he a big star? Why isn't he, some of these guys don't even have a resume. So I had Angelo Poffo, and then the problem is, I didn't look the part. So I was in Paducah, Kentucky in 1973, and then I go to Atlanta, which was not the NWA, but the opposition group. Have you ever heard of Ann Gunkel and Tom Ernesto?
Ann Gunkel, Tom Ernesto, they were on I think it was TCG at the time, and they got the time slot away from the NWA, and a big battle ensued for 2 years. So you worked with the opposition group against the NWA, correct?
I'm impressed. You know a lot.
Okay.
Ray Gunkel passed away, and then there was a big fight as they tried to take away the rights of Ann Gunkel.
Lanny, I think they called it the Battle of Atlanta, right?
Well, yeah, there was, I'm amazed that you know so much. Actually, you know more about it than I do. For me, it was a tremendous opportunity. As a matter of fact, Tom Ernesto, he said, I promised your father I would treat you like my own son. And he even said, I noticed that you've been keeping company with Dickie Steinborn.
Lanny, let me ask you a quick question about your dad. Wasn't your dad in the Guinness Book of World Records at one point in time?
No, absolutely not. Okay, I'm glad to clear that up.
Didn't he do...
He was in Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Oh, okay.
And if you go on my website, LannyPoffo.com, you'll see the original cartoon that Robert Ripley had. As a matter of fact, about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, I went to Chicago. Of course, my dad turned 84 years old on April the 10th. So in 2002, he went into the Italian American Sports Hall of Fame. And I went on stage to introduce him, and I said, Io sono molto contento di essere qui, back home in Illinois, to honor those who lived the dreams of every girl and boy. 'Twas back in 1945 on Independence Day, the Nazis had surrendered. Japan was on its way. My dad was in the Navy, as history will tell, as he was bleeding through the mat a world record fell. He did 6,000 sit-ups with an extra 33 to glorify our Savior who died for you and me. And Robert Ripley's feature celebrated this event. Giving credence to success is not an accident. That's always been his motto through times both good and bad. He's a real Hall of Famer and the world's greatest dad.
Well, 6,000 sit-ups. I remember when I was young trying to get in shape for sports in high school. 6,000 sit-ups, Lanny. It's just incredible. And your dad is one of the early pioneers in professional wrestling who kind of forgotten in some ways.
Well, the thing is, no matter what you accomplish, everybody's forgotten. I remember when my brother was the world champion of the World Wrestling Federation, and George Scott, Buddy Rogers, his wife, my brother, my dad, and myself were all on the beach in Clearwater. It's about a year before Buddy Rogers passed away, and he was the greatest of them all, you might say. I mean, arguably. It's a good argument. Yeah. I know you know who it is because you're so up on, history. But here's a man and his son came up, ignored me, ignored Buddy Rogers, ignored Angelo Poffo, ignored George Scott, but the most important thing, ignored the nature boy Buddy Rogers, went up to Randy Macho Man Savage and got his autograph, not knowing who any of us were. Wow. And I was curious, how did Buddy Rogers react? He acted beautifully, like he had passed the baton, because I had always heard that he was an egomaniac. Well, maybe he was, but not that day. He accepted it very well, because the public has a very short memory. If you're not on TV this week, you are a forgotten man. Well, in many ways that's true, but now, thanks to the Internet and YouTube, people can go back in time and take a look at some of the heroes from the past, Lanny, and I think that it's kept some of the memories alive, even though to a lot of degree you're right. I mean, look at Michael Jordan in basketball, now surpassed in public awareness by someone like LeBron James. So there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. Let's get back to, you wrestled in Atlanta in the early 1970s for Ann Gunkel. What was that like? Okay, sounds like you've got a call. Well, I had a call. Go ahead. Okay, very good. Anyway, what was it like? I was a boy in a man's world, okay? And I was struggling to, for example, I thought I was the happiest kid in the world because I had my own car, my own apartment, and, I had girls. You wouldn't believe the groupies. I couldn't believe it myself. Because actually I was a little shy with girls. And these girls didn't care if I could talk or not. I mean, they were there for, and I'll tell you something, that was, it was like a kid in a candy store. And also, I wasn't a very good wrestler. I didn't look the part, and I was a horrible driver. But I had this advantage. I knew I was a bad wrestler, I knew I didn't look the part, and I knew I was a bad driver, and that's the reason that I became a good driver, I became a good wrestler, and I eventually developed a good body. I find people, like, almost hilarious that have confidence with almost nothing to go by. In other words, they have nothing going for them, and yet they walk around arrogant. I combated the fact that I couldn't drive very well with obeying the speed limit and looking out for everybody. Right. Not driving carelessly, hoping that my natural reflexes would help. But when you lack experience, I look at the actuarial tables. You have teenagers and old people dying left and right every day. Some are too young to drive, some are too old. And then in the ring, I didn't look the part, but in those days, who wanted to look the part? You had these fat people that wore their trunks up to their armpits, and they dig into their trunks for gimmicks, and then they gouge your eyes and call that wrestling. And they talk about timing and psychology. They may be, but I'll tell you what, as a wrestling fan, I would not pay to see these guys. Yeah. So I decided that in order to make it in wrestling, I was going to have to give the people something for their money. And then I met Terry Funk about a year later, and I thought he was the greatest worker of the 70s. And he befriended me, and he actually, in Amarillo, he worked on top with me and had some ideas for me. And he said, Lanny, I'll tell you something. You've got a lot of talent, but if you want to make it in this business, you've got to be peculiar. And I never forgot that. So whenever I got my chance, I became peculiar.
Right. And so meeting Terry Funk gave you the idea that if you were to just go along like everyone else, you weren't going to be able to make any kind of money. Lanny, back then, what was, for a guy just starting out, what would they be paid on a nightly basis?
Okay, you're not going to believe this. As a matter of fact, I can't believe it either. But in Atlanta, for example, in 1974, and here I was just turned 19 years of age, I would make anywhere from $25, $35, $50. The biggest payoff I had was $150. And believe it or not, when I left Atlanta, I had $10,000 in the bank.
So back then, so back then, Lanny, if you were to get $50 a night, was it that it wasn't that much money, or we'll get to the point that you saved a lot, but or was $50 in the 1974, was that a lot of money?
Okay, every person there had the same prices that to contend with that I did.
Okay.
Okay, here's the reason why I succeeded and they failed.
Okay.
Number one, I was single. I had nobody to blame but myself. Okay? Number two, did I mention I was single? Okay? And when you're married, you don't know where your money's going. I know I was married for 12 years. And I'll tell you what, I have no idea why prostitution is illegal but marriage is legal. But that's another thing.
Okay, we'll get to that later, but go ahead.
Okay, but the thing is, and I didn't really know where every penny was going myself, because what I would do is just bank, the money that was left over, and but I always believed in eating well, because I always knew that you can't save money on food. Now, don't be ridiculous. Now, the thing is, everybody had an opportunity to save money, and everybody was complaining about the expenses, when the fact is they should look in the mirror. And that's why when you're an independent contractor, that's what happened to Ric Flair. Why did he wrestle so long? Well, for one thing, he's great, and he deserved it, and they liked him. So he had all that going for him. The other thing is he needed to. He owed the government like millions and millions of dollars, and I'm not just making it up. Look at Ric Flair's biography as told to Keith Elliott Greenberg, who is, by the way, the greatest writer I've ever met. And that's pretty good coming from Lanny Poffo. But the thing is, if you're an independent contractor and you don't pay your taxes, well, guess what? At the end of the year, Uncle Sam puts his hand out and says, now, and you say, I'm Flair, and the government says, I don't care. And
then, of course, they compound the penalties, so before you know it, someone who's made like a Ric Flair, who's made incredible amounts of money over his career, is in debt and having to wrestle until he's very old, and that's unfortunate. You put together $10,000 in the mid 1970s, Lanny. I understand that's a lot of money for back then, and that probably. How'd you feel when you had that much money accumulated?
Well, for one thing, keep this in mind. I must say that I started with $3,000 when I went to Atlanta.
Okay.
So I didn't save $10,000 there.
Okay.
But the thing is, I had already developed the habit of saving the money. And the habit went before me from Angelo Poffo, who you must have, to me...
The miser, right?
The miser, yes.
Yes.
But doing 6,033 consecutive sit-ups in 4 hours, 10 minutes is not just a testament to his physical, but his mental stamina. Because can you imagine... when everything in your body says quit and you say, no, I'm continuing. You see, but anyway, everything in life is working against us. Like, for example, advertising. I just was looking at Ted Kennedy, and, his father had all that money, Joseph P. Kennedy. But did you know when he went off the bridge at Chappaquiddick in Martha's Vineyard, he was driving a 10-year-old Oldsmobile. And they said, why would a man as rich as you be driving a 10-year-old Oldsmobile? He says, I don't know, it still ran. In other words, he wasn't playing the game.
Well, we've lost that thinking over the last 8 years, and you can see, or maybe earlier, but you can see where it's gotten us. in the United
Right,
States.
and you better get it back. There's a reason that very few of us are alive, and there's a reason that very few of us are wealthy or even have our head above water.
Yeah.
Of the wrestlers.
Yeah.
And you can say, well, this and that. Hey, it's habitual. You pay yourself first. I read a book, The Richest Man in Babylon. My father insisted that we read that. And it's not important just to read it, but to heed it. While we're doing poetry, never give advice. Wise men don't need it, and fools won't heed it. So,
right, yeah.
Anyway, it's habitual. You are where you are because of what you are. It's about habits. I've got some bad habits too. Fortunately, none of them are money habits.
Right. Well,
I'm sorry, but I go on. I ramble.
Lanny, that's fine. That's fine. I appreciate it because it's very important, especially for young people listening to this today, to realize that your younger years are your best years to establish good habits, saving, investing, because when you get older, it gets more difficult. And
right.
What you're telling me is your dad instilled in you a concept that at a young age, hey, you better start off right if you want to be in good shape when you hit 45, 50, 55, 60. And we'll get to that. We'll get to that as time goes on. Lanny, you worked. I remember in 1975, 1976, the first time I became aware of you. You worked with the Detroit promotion of the NWA. You were a tag team champion with your dad, right?
Yes, I'll tell you what happened. In 1974, it was Thanksgiving, in fact. Right before Thanksgiving, what happened is about a week before that, Gunkel Enterprises had, some people think Tom Ernesto was a double agent cooperating with Jim Barnett, okay, that he had destroyed Gunkel Enterprises. Dick Steinborn thinks so. It's possible that he's right. I have no idea, okay, but what happened was, then we were going to the Sheik, okay, and the Sheik actually wanted us. But my dad didn't want to go there because he's fed up with the snow. And myself, I didn't really care. I just wanted to wrestle. And I had already bleached my hair blonde, so Salt Weingroff, my father, and myself went in as a tag team. And at this time, I must admit, I still couldn't really wrestle very well. In fact, I had broken my ankle in Atlanta, and I wasn't even getting around too well. So, for some reason, the Sheik liked us and decided to put the tag team championship belts on us, and we defended them for several months. And it was, I got to wrestle Lou Thesz, Leo Burke, Bull Curry, Freddie Curry, Tex McKenzie. These are names that, a lot of people don't know, but these were huge people.
Now, in 1974, Ed Farrat, who was the Sheik, had a huge business in Detroit. He was making a fortune, correct? He had just won the promotional war with Dick the Bruiser. Were you there for the big crowds?
Actually, yes, I saw some big crowds, but I missed the heyday.
You missed the heyday, okay.
Because, but then again, we saw some good business. But at that time, if you look in the calendar, the economy was really getting worse in Detroit. It all came to, they used to blame, the car industry. And that's what everybody, set their mileage at. Of course, when Vince McMahon came to Detroit, he used to draw no matter what the economy was like. Like he just got back from WrestleMania 25 in the middle of a horrible economy, and he drew between $6 and $7 million.
Sure.
So, in other words, if the people want to see it, they will find the money and they will find the way to get there.
Well,
if they don't want to see it, you can blame the economy.
Well, sure, and I agree with you to that to some extent, except for the fact that to run a local promotion in the 70s, you had to run every week or every couple of weeks and have to get people to physically leave their homes and go to the arena. Vince has got a little bit different business today where he only comes into certain cities maybe, 3 or 4 times a year, and a lot of it's done on TV through pay-per-view.
Yeah, you're right.
So it's a little different. But what you're saying is that while Detroit, the downfall of the Detroit promotion was blamed on the auto industry, possibly if they had promoted it a little different, maybe it could have rid out the tough times.
Well, I'm amazed that they made it as long as they did, because you're talking about our family promoted for 8 years, called the ICW. It was they call it an outlaw group. I resent that. I just think we're a competition. And, the American way, if you have a Pizza Hut, you can also have a Shakey's Pizza, and a Little Caesars, and a Boston Pizza, whatever. In other words, let the people decide which pizza is the best for the money.
Right.
So I just know that promotion is hard. Most wrestlers don't understand that because they've never promoted.
So how many years were you in Detroit wrestling with the Sheik?
I was there for a year and a half.
Okay.
And then I got mono, that disease, mononucleosis.
Okay.
And then so I had to take some time off. So then I joined my father in Amarillo, Texas, and that's where I met the Funks, Dory and Terry, because Dory Funk Sr. had passed away before that. And Terry Funk actually chose me to wrestle on top. It's his territory. And that's when I was a heel. And then the angles that we worked was short-lived because Terry Funk became the NWA World Champion. In 1975, I think he defeated He defeated Jack Briscoe and then lost it to Harley Race. I think. I can't remember.
Yeah, no, you're right. Right, he lost it to Harley Race in Toronto. That was, what year, 76, 77?
You got me.
77. Okay, so you wrestled in Amarillo. Now, that's another territory from the past that's pretty much forgotten. What was that like?
Long trips, but I enjoyed every minute of it.
Okay.
And, the scenery, I just can't get used to the fact that I was paid to travel. Some people think that travel is the worst thing of wrestling. I thought it was the best. Do you realize how few people? Let me ask you a question. You're living in Scottsdale. You know what I mean? If you wanted to go to Australia, wouldn't it cost you a fortune?
Yes.
Well, I got to go for free. How's that?
Lanny, it's all how you look at it. Some of the guys probably looked at it like it was torture, and few of the guys like yourself looked at it like, wow, this is something else. Here I am, a young kid getting to go all over the world.
Yeah, and I had a few conversations with Hercules Hernandez in the dressing room. He says, what are we doing in Australia? I said, you're not in Australia. The only thing you saw was the inside of a hotel room, the inside of a locker room, and the inside of an airplane. I said, I have looked out the window and experienced Australia, and we all had the same opportunity to do so.
Mm. So it's, like a lot of things with life, it's how you look at it. So you're driving these long trips in Texas, Amarillo. How was the business good? Was the attendance good?
It was pretty good, yeah. I don't know the bottom line. Sometimes things look good, visually, but it's an illusion, you see. Like, for example, like at WrestleMania 25, I think they had 70,000 odd people. However, it was the most money ever taken. Like Pontiac Silverdome WrestleMania 3 had 93,000 people, but evidently less money.
Yeah.
But I would say that if one guy bought a $10 million ticket, that would be a good crowd too.
Oh, sure. The gross, yeah, the gross is there, sure.
So whatever, I look at it money. And of course the bottom line is not the gross, but the net. In other words, is there a profit? Is there a loss? How big?
Yeah.
So, but Amarillo territory, let's see, I can't remember, but Friday night we would be in Amarillo for the house show. Then Saturday morning, I think we would be, I'm getting it all messed up. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Saturday morning, definitely TV studio where we do our show. Then we go to Lubbock, Texas, for that afternoon, or Hereford or someplace. And then we go to Abilene or San Angelo. And then we go to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and do promos and interviews before the matches. And then we go to El Paso, Texas. If you look, it's like a loop. And we just complete the loop every single week. And sure, it was pretty hard on the car, even hard on the body. But the guys that wanted to lift weights all got their workouts in. They made it their business. The guys that wanted to save money all got to save money. It's all about habitual.
How were those fans in West Texas? What were they like?
Well, what happened was I spoke just enough Spanish to get myself killed. So I said, sure. I went on TV and made interviews, and I said some horrible and ridiculous things, insulting the people. So in Lubbock, I beat up a fan, and I could have been knifed, but I wasn't. Because they all carry cuchillos, which is a knife.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
And I know you're in Arizona. You know that there's a lot of Mexicans, but, it's like, I don't want to be racial or anything, but, they carry a lot of knives. I think you got gangs like the Nuestra Familia and things like that. Have you heard of that?
Oh, sure. I've driven through parts of West Texas, and it's very surprising because many of the cities are more Mexican than they are American, and I'm sure that was going on in the 70s as well. So it's a little bit of a culture shock coming from maybe Detroit or Atlanta.
Right, and I was too dumb to know that I had actual heat. Of course, in the world of wrestling entertainment, you don't have to worry about the fans as much because everything's well guarded and they've got barricades. But back in Texas, fans had easy access to you. And I was just too stupid to know that you can't insult people on TV in their native tongue and then expect not to, but I was thinking that was getting over.
Yeah.
I guess it could have been worse. I guess I could have been punctured.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Physically, sure. The cuchillo right in the stomach. Beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, we're in Amarillo. Are you still adding to the $10,000?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you are? Okay. So
yeah, and then we go, after that, we go to Pensacola, Florida. Didn't stay there very long, although that was a very nice place. And then let's see, we went back to the Sheik. And from there we went to Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay, stop. Time out, Lanny. Let me ask you this. At this point, how was the Sheik's business?
It was going down.
It was going down. Was he personally suffering or just the promotion itself?
Well, when I'll tell you what. When Mark Lewin was there, things were good. And as soon as he left, it seems like it took the air out of the tires.
Okay.
That guy was very creative. He always thought about creating a spectacle. I really admire that guy. He had a lot of charisma in the dressing room. One time, Eddie Jr., Sheik's son, came up to him and said something in front of the guys that he shouldn't have. And Mark Lewin says, "Hey, are you my friend or are you my enemy?" He says, "I'm your friend." He says, "Never criticize me in front of the guys. Always have the decency to take me aside." And I thought, wow, that was pretty good.
Well, Mark Lewin was interesting because his career actually built up over time. He's remembered for what he did in Florida with the Purple Haze in 84 and 85, and then he was starting to get a little bit older, and he kind of dropped out of wrestling and disappeared. But if he had come along a little later, he would have been a very big star, maybe for Vince.
Yeah, you never know, but a life is about being at the right place at the right time, and so few of us ever get an opportunity, like I had, to be there at the right moment, and my moment lasted 4 months.
Yeah.
And
Lanny,
yeah.
I always wondered about Detroit. The Sheik seemed to be, in some ways, ahead of his time. They made a movie about him, I Like to Hurt People. He would film at the arenas. He brought in a lot of stars from outside territories. But at the same time, like you said before, they blamed it on the auto industry. He seemed to fall behind in certain ways. What do you think the problem was with the mix there?
Well, let me ask you a question first. Are you from Detroit, Ohio area?
No.
Well, why do you know all this?
I'm interviewing you. I need to know everything.
Okay, but I'm just saying, did you experience it?
No, I lived in Connecticut. I've never been to it. I've never seen it. But,
I'll tell you what.
You were there, so I'm going to ask you.
Okay. I really liked Eddie Fairhead, and I'll just tell you a little something that nobody knows about him, okay? He had this gimmick where he used to put the prayer rug and he used to pray to Allah, okay? And then he used to do that for 10 minutes every night. Sometimes his match would last 2 seconds, but the ceremony before would last 10 minutes. And he would work the crowd that way. And then the match would last a minute or two, and then it would be a double disqualification or whatever with blood. And then they would fight after the match was over in the people. But for all that Musliming and all that praying to Allah, he died, I can't remember, 5-6 years ago, I think he passed away.
Yeah.
And guess what? His funeral was Catholic.
Oh.
So there you go. All those years on the prayer rug, and he's a Catholic. So there.
But he was Syrian, right?
Oh, he was from Saudi Arabia. Bloodline.
Okay.
And let me tell you something. This guy had a face that you will never forget. And, he looked right at you. He's a scary looking guy. I was in Chicago at the O'Hare Airport, and I hadn't slept in I had like 2 hours of sleep 3 days in a row. And I'm about to get on a plane going somewhere, and I'm reading the USA Today, and I used to do the crossword puzzle every single day. That's my big exercise. So Sheik goes up to me, and I hadn't seen him in years. He goes, "Hey, Lanny." And he put his face right on my face, and it scared the hell out of me. Because I said, whoa, I didn't expect to see him again,
What year was this? What year?
Oh, I was in the World Wrestling Federation, and he was on a plane with Sabu about to leave for Singapore.
Okay, so 88, 89, somewhere around there.
I'm going to say 88 or 80. I'm going to say 88 or 87.
Okay.
And he's actually a handsome guy, but he looked ugly to me with his nose right in my face and all those scar tissue on his forehead. I mean, trust me, I did not expect that face at that airport at that time. My blood ran cold. I said, "Oh, Sheik, how you doing?" Oh my God, you scared me. He said,
yeah. So, Lanny, I'm going to ask you again. What do you think the problem was with the Detroit territory that it went down? Do you think it was too much Sheik, or was it just that the economy was bad? Because that in the 1970s, that was a very, very famous promotion.
Well, let's look at it another way. Instead of saying what killed Detroit, ask yourself this question: how did they keep it together so long?
Okay.
You see what I mean? It's like, I think that's amazing that they kept people interested so long. Now, you say too much Sheik. They can say that, but remember when Vince McMahon was losing all his talent to Ted Turner? One of the things that made the pendulum swing is that Vince McMahon became the top heel. It was right after the Montreal Screwjob with Bret Hart. He decided, hey, this is working. Let me be a heel. So you got to admit one thing about being the top heel. You're not going to double cross yourself and go to Ted Turner.
Okay.
By putting the stock in your own self, you know what I mean? He's not about to jump ship for more money.
Sure.
He's going to be loyal to himself. So sure, make yourself a star.
Okay. So you're looking at it from the point of view that you're surprised they were able to keep it going as long as they did. Even though, Lanny, in that era, the promotions tended to pretty much run forever. Georgia, Florida, Texas, California with Mike LaBelle went downhill, but okay, I can accept that.
Well, okay, here's a promotion that never really lost steam. It's just that the promoters got old. Don Owen. First of all, Don Owen was a businessman, a very wealthy man, who ran Portland on a shoestring budget, and did very well for many years. What happened to Portland to kill it? Don Owen got old. Elton died.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have ever lost. But how old was he when he died? 80? You get tired of promoting after a while. But that was a cash cow for many years, and I'm using that as a pun because he was in Eugene, Oregon, and I guess he had many head of cattle. And, see, it's all about business has got to be streamlined and entrepreneurial. And to answer the question, what killed Detroit, it's a very simplistic, ridiculous answer, but they started taking in less money than they were spending.
Okay.
Okay, so that goes for Enron or any business. You've got to make more than you're spending, and it's called profit. And otherwise it's called losses. It's about black and red ink. So, you know, and it's no great mystery. It's just that and then, of course, let's look at the auto industry. You know, the big three, Chrysler, General Motors, and Ford, right?
Yes.
They have these United Auto Workers unions that are mob-controlled, syndicate-based. I don't want to break your bubble, but the people in charge are skimming off the top, and they're organized crime. So are the Teamsters, so is Jimmy Hoffa and all that. You know, it's all tainted. Anywhere where money lies, honor dies. So anyway, they got greedy, and they're making X amount of dollars. They want more, 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 and more. There's a four-letter word called more, M-O-R-E. As long as you want more, you're never happy. So I'm happy because, you know, I'm satisfied. I don't want, you know, I'd like to get more, like anybody, but I also appreciate what I have, which causes contentment. So what happened is they gave the United Auto Workers more, more, and more, and the next thing you know, they're making the price of the car go up, and the next thing you know, Japan and Germany are building better cars. So that's what happened to the auto industry. This also happens to wrestling. You're talking about Sheik being ahead of his time, spending this, getting people in, flying people in, doing everything first class. Well, what happens is that's great, but the bottom line suffers, and you're not running it on a shoestring anymore. You've got a big nut, large expenses, and then it makes it easy for your empire to fall like a house of cards. You know, if Sheik finally lost his house, he had to mortgage it. You know, he had a beautiful mansion that was bigger than the Holiday Inn. You know, and
wait, whoa, Lanny, have you been in his? Because I had heard stories about this home he lived in that was just extraordinary. Have you been in it? Had you been in it?
I was in it about 10 times.
Okay.
And it was in a town called Williamston, which is like a suburb of Grand Rapids or someplace. I can't remember anymore. Yeah, I was in it. We did promos there. And the Sheik, he took in a lot of people. He always said, I'll take care of you. You know, and boy, he brought kids off the street. He helped people. I mean, this is something that you've never heard of. You see what I mean? People don't talk about the Sheik like that. But I saw that he made an effort to make people's lives better when he had the opportunity to do so. And, you know, if you want to knock the Sheik, I can knock him for you too, because I saw good and bad. But I never hear the good stuff. And this was something very good. And the home was ridiculously huge. And it was ornate and all this stuff. It looked like, when you think about it, if Warren Buffett is living in Omaha in the same house he lived in 30 years ago, then why should the Sheik be living in a Holiday Inn? I mean, a home the size of the Holiday Inn.
So this home to operate, just the operating expenses, he would have had to have had that promotion running at high speed to maintain it. Is that?
That's what I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and you know, I don't want to be crass, but why do you need 12 bathrooms when you only have one butt?
Well, Lanny, what happens? I think some people, or maybe a lot of people, if they hit that kind of success, they spend. It's just the way mankind has been set up probably since the beginning of time.
Well, the thing is, it's like they spend money they don't have, things they don't need to impress people that don't love them.
You're the exception, Lanny. That's why we're talking to you, because you're a little different in the world of wrestling. I mean, most of the guys.
I'm looking around here. You know, I'm living. If you came over, you wouldn't be that impressed, but it's paid for. You see what I mean? Nobody's taking my house.
Well, that's, like I said, that's the thing that we lost over the last 8 years is everything was being done on the bank's money, and then eventually the party ran out, and now we're experiencing the downfall. So the Sheik had his own party in the 1970s, and I guess like around 78, the party ran out for him as well.
Yeah, and then they kept making false starts. And I heard, actually, Dory Funk told me that, the Funks were coming in there because they liked those guys, and they were trying to help pop the territory, and they finally got a big house, and Eddie Jr., the Sheik's son, came in and said, hey, they just robbed the box office. Well, that's an old trick. That means you don't get paid that night. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I think they had taken a night at, I don't know if it was the Joe Louis Arena. It was the big one. It was bigger than Cobo.
Either Cobo Arena or Joe Louis. I don't remember.
I think it
was
Joe.
I wasn't on the card, but
yeah.
Dory Funk Jr. never told a lie in his life.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I mean, if there's an honest man in wrestling, it's the Funks.
Yeah, so that was the last real chance they had. I remember Dory and Terry were up there, and they were having a big feud with the Sheik, and then after that, it kind of just went down. How was the Sheik's son for Ed Jr.? Was he never looked much like a wrestler.
Well, he made himself quite a star too. You see. Anyway, I don't like to knock the guy, but he got himself kind of a George Goulas reputation. But any promoter's son would anyway, right?
Yeah, I believe that. I
mean, here's Vince McMahon. He's a promoter's son, actually a promoter's grandson, and all he did is surpass the father, okay? Now, there's people that used to work for Vince McMahon Sr. that missed those days, but I'm telling you, you got to give the devil his due if he is indeed the devil. I don't like to knock success, okay?
Right.
That makes me feel like a failure. And another thing, too, more people die of jealousy than heart attacks, cancer, and car wrecks combined.
I believe that.
It's just they can't put it on the death certificate because how can you say he died of jealousy? But it seems to be human nature. And, if I wanted to be jealous, I wouldn't have a liver because my brother's the Macho Man.
Yeah, we're going to get to that, Lanny, because I'm very interested in the relationship and how difficult it was for you to live a little bit in his shadow because he became so famous. Yeah, you both started off at about the same time, but let's get that in a bit later. Your dad started ICW. Now, you had been kind of on the outskirts of wrestling in a way. You hadn't wrestled in New York or some of the bigger territories. Your dad at some point must have said, hey, let's just do this ourselves, right?
Yeah, I was against it myself, but I came in reluctantly. Okay, I had absolutely no personal ambition to ever promote. I'll tell you why. I was making money doing what I was doing. I was lazy, and if you can't be lazy when you're promoting. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
I like to have fun. I like to have a lot of leisure time, leisure activities. I like to be well-rounded. I didn't like to have 24 hours a day where I'm just working. That's no balance. I don't mind working, but I think your life should be divided in three: rest, fun, and work. And if you miss rest, then fun and work are going to suffer. And if you miss fun, then the other two are suffer. I don't want to make a syllogism, but I think you need all three. And I think what gets you out of balance, and it's a proven fact. I could retire, but I won't, because it's a proven fact that at the age of 54, if I retired, I would actually die sooner.
Well, the days. I can tell you from my own dad, he told me as soon as he retired, the days started falling into each other and got lazier and lazier and lazier.
Yeah, you need to work. You need to study. I should have mentioned that. Learning is always very good for you. To seek out learning and study. Work, study, fun. I know I added another. Now we have 4. But you understand, without rest, what do you have? Nothing. You got to rest, you got to have fun, you got to study, and you got to work.
Well, something tells me when you're running your own promotion, rest and fun are limited.
Yeah, but I managed to get. I tried to get it in, but it was just too much work.
Yeah.
And it was 8 years, and then it was 1985 when Randy got the call from Vince McMahon, and then reluctantly they took me. But I figured water finds its own level, and eventually I did find it to the top.
It took a long time, but you did. Now, Lanny, I want to ask you about ICW because it's another one of these forgotten promotions. Can we talk about it?
Yeah.
Okay. Again, ahead of its time. You had a lot of things going on there that Vince would actually bring in later. Now, I'm not saying he copied ICW because he might never have seen any of the shows, but you guys, you do almost anything on air to get attention for yourselves.
That's right, and eventually the TV stations got angry about it.
Why?
Because when you cross boundaries and lines,
yeah,
you have to worry about your content. See, the thing is too, I was against all of it, but I had no voice. Okay, I would prefer to have. I do not have a hardcore mentality with wrestling. I believe in entertainment. Okay. I think that it would be better to throw a pie in your face and have you wipe the, you know what I mean, and then look at the camera like, wow, I just got pie thrown in my face. Have that face, than it is for me to break a chair across your head and have you bleeding.
Yeah.
I've seen both, I've done both, and I found that the pie in the face worked better. Where it was just fun, and it wasn't as bone-chillingly scary.
Versus the brutality, which of course has crept into wrestling again since ECW and a lot of these independent groups are doing things that really probably shouldn't be done to try and draw attention to themselves. So are you telling me ICW was overly violent?
Yes, I'm saying it was overly violent. I don't like violence. I think comedy works better. When I became the Genius, I proved it because, not that I drew the money, but while I was a co-star in Hulk Hogan's match, we broke 2 box office records, one in Los Angeles and the other in Oklahoma City, and business was very good because I understood. See, first of all, they didn't want me to be a villain because I was too good looking, and I didn't look mean enough. Okay, so I thought, well, the only way I'm going to prove them wrong is by being the only comedian in a very serious business. And that was my ticket to selling tickets. And it doesn't matter how you sell tickets, it matters if you sell tickets.
Right.
And wrestling's a variety show, which means, just like when you go to the circus, the magnificent man on the flying trapeze, and also you got the beautiful woman here, then you gotta have the fat lady that you pay, 50 cents for at the freak show. Or something. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
They all combine to make you a memorable evening at the circus.
Right. So ICW, overly violent. You spent 8 years there. Your brother developed his persona in that time frame, right?
Well, actually, he was developing his persona all the time, even while he was with Vince. This guy, Randy, is a perfectionist. Okay. And he was always working on new things, constantly improving himself. You wouldn't believe, first of all, I grew up with him. He's my older brother. He was National Honor Society. He was organized. Everything was in its place. This guy was, he would even drive people crazy with his fastidious pernickettiness about every little detail of minutia of life. And when I wrestled him, trust me, not in the World Wrestling Federation, but in the ICW and before that in the Maritime Provinces in 1978 where we were with Emile Dupre, it was the greatest matches I've ever had. Why? Because he took the time to figure out what made me special, and he brought it out in me. He took my potential, and I've got some good and bad aspects, but he accentuated the positive in me and everybody he ever wrestled. He studied his opponent, and he made sure that opponent looked good. And because he decided that it's 50-50, I look good, he looks good, then we go home, which means you finish your match. Well, Randy put a lot into every aspect of the business, his costumes, his interviews, his wrestling, and even his persona when he was not in the limelight, like at the airport and on the street.
Yeah. When did he develop the the Macho Man. Is that how he speaks naturally, or is that something that he developed over time?
Well, if he called me up right now, he'd say, "Hello, how you doing? Yeah, I'll tell you what, I need you to write a poem, but I don't want it to be long and boring because, Lanny, you can be long and boring." And then, so then he got on the air. Sometimes he'd turn the dial up, sometimes he'd whisper, sometimes he'd turn his back to the camera, yeah, thinking, tonight, and then he'd scream, but he'd always change up, and it didn't matter if he did 100 interviews in one day. His idea was to make them all different. Maybe he'd accidentally stumble on something that could be even more successful instead of getting in a pattern.
Okay, but growing up as a kid, did he speak that way, or he developed this?
No, he had a strange voice all the time.
Oh, he had it? Okay. So it was always strange.
And then he took it just like this. He had two bad things, his voice and his hair. And he made them both his gimmick. In other words, he turned negatives into positives. When he was growing up, he said, "Hey, what's the matter with your voice?" Well, in 1985, he became the most imitated man in show business with that voice.
Yeah. When you were in ICW, did you have any concept that within 3 or 4 years that you and your brother would be on this huge stage? Because I remember seeing some of the matches on TV that you would have, and it was pretty much an empty arena, right?
No, it may have looked like an empty arena when you were watching it, but we drew some pretty big crowds. And we actually did good for 3 years, and then it kind of started dying out. And that's when I wanted to kill it, but my brother wouldn't have it, my dad wouldn't have it. In other words, they were committed. I was just involved. It's like the difference between a plate of ham and eggs. Well, the chicken was involved, but the pig was committed.
Yeah.
They were the ham, I was the eggs.
I always thought your dad, with that miser character he had, and I know this is going back a long ways, but he wore a mask. He was tremendous on interviews.
Oh, he was great, and he had this saying, "Better rich and dead than poor and alive." The miser knows that money is the most important thing in the world. I gave him that name, the miser. I thought he says, he needed a mask because his body was young, but his face was getting old. So he hid his, he had to hide his face so he couldn't, otherwise he looked like an old man out there.
And then they unmasked him, and from that point on, I don't think he was nearly as effective, obviously, right?
No, but you can't have a guy keep a mask all, how many years can he do that?
Yeah.
So, we had to, the great thing about every masked man is they get unmasked. So, short-sightedness, yeah, we drew a few crowds with the hair versus the mask versus this, the loser gets run over by a motorcycle. I made that up.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, that's not true. The loser has to handle a stick of dynamite, like the Coyote and Roadrunner.
Yeah.
I'm making that up,
right,
but
right.
All these stipulations are ridiculous.
Well, I think they do some of that today on some of these independent tours, but
I think so.
Yeah, I've seen stuff that's we'll talk about that later, but that's it's not going in the right direction for sure. So Lanny, I'm going to ask you again. You're in ICW. You guys, you're doing okay. You're doing good, or you're struggling financially.
Well, the thing is, we were already rich, so that we were able to struggle longer than anybody else would have been able to struggle. But I didn't like it because I thought it was too much work for not enough return. Okay.
Could you have ever pictured that within 3 or 4 years you'd be in the World Wrestling Federation with these incredible crowds and all this attention? Did you see it coming at all?
Let me explain something to you, Gary. If you get nothing out of my interview, hear this. I never imagined it in my wildest dreams that I would either be in the WWF or wrestle Hulk Hogan on NBC.
Amazing.
And here's why. I thought I wasn't big enough. I just didn't have the body. And I didn't take steroids, and I wasn't about to. Then in 1989, when I go from Leaping Lanny to the Genius, I realized that I got tempted, and I took decadurabolin, which is a steroid. and I took it like an injection a week, like for like 3 shots a month for eight months. And then after I finally wrestled Hulk Hogan, I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, "Self, you've reached the epitome of wrestling. You've defeated Hulk Hogan on NBC. Now, do you want to die or do you want to live?" And I said, "Self, I'm going to live." So I pulled that needle out, and let me tell you, all those muscles, they shrunk. Within a month or 2 months, I was back to being just an athletic build. And it took away my libido, which is the sex drive, but it didn't matter because I was married at the time.
Okay.
You know, they found out what kills the sex drive in women. It's called wedding cake.
Yeah. I hear you, Lanny.
Okay, bitter? Who's bitter? Okay, never mind.
Okay, let me ask you this. The world, you went to Memphis, and that's a lot of that stuff is available on the internet with Randy against Jerry. Then the opportunity to come up to the World Wrestling Federation. What year did you enter the WWF?
June of 1985.
Okay, June of 85. Now, at that point, I know in 1984 Vince had just started the national expansion, and the business he was taking a lot of chances. Was it more solid by the time you came in?
Well, I don't know. See, here's the thing. I don't see the papers. I don't know the money. I don't see what was going on. I didn't have my hand on the pulse.
Yeah.
But I will tell you this. I was in WrestleMania 19 years ago at the Sky Dome in WrestleMania 6 when Hulk Hogan got beat by the Ultimate Warrior, and I was Mr. Perfect's manager, and I got my hair cut by Brutus the Barber Beefcake. And I saw 2 things that day backstage that I want to tell you about.
Go ahead.
Somebody came up to Vince and says, "My God, there's first thing is, we've lost the feed for the pay-per-view." So Vince says, "Is it a big problem or a small problem?" "It's a big problem." He says, "Well, we go on the air in 4 hours. I suggest you get with it." And then somebody says, "What did he say?" He says, "Nothing we can't handle." And he looked like I said, "Wow." I've seen promoters where if a button works loose on their sweater, they freak out and they want to kill themselves. You see what I mean?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
"Oh my God, a button has worked loose on my sweater. Now I have a loose button, and if I go to button it, it might pop off." You know what I mean? Here's a guy with millions of dollars involved, and all of a sudden, they lost a feed to the pay-per-view, which means there's going to be a lot of refunds, I think. I think it's important, don't you?
Absolutely.
And he acted like it was nothing. He said, "Let's get to work," And the other one was about 30 minutes before bell. He says he noticed that the arena was empty, even though it was sold out. And they discovered that there was a big traffic jam on 401, I think it's the name of the Canadian highway. And so he says, "Well, just we'll have the announcers explain that that's the, or whatever, that the people are still coming in. But we got to start it on time." But in other words, no matter how risky and dicey it was, I saw a lot of promoters panic in my life. I never saw him panic. And he had a lot more to lose.
Right. Well, in the 1980s, there were maybe 33 promoters in the United States. Today, there's 1 plus TNA. And it's easy to criticize Vince, and I don't like a lot of the things in the current wrestling product, but there's a reason, and you just pointed out just a specific example of why he is a billionaire. It's really amazing what he's done, because in the 1970s, if you said that a wrestling promoter would eventually become a billionaire, you'd be laughed out of the room. So what he's done there is no comparison.
It's just, here's the thing. Everybody's got a lottery mentality. Like, I want to get rich in one number, okay? Boom, you go from rags to riches. But see, success does not occur in one day. Success is daily. And like, I could even tell you that during the steroid scandal, when he was faced incarceration, he still kept his head high. And he fought, and he He won. But if he had gone to jail, I bet he would be the most optimistic guy in jail. And I believe that if you took away all his money and all his clothes and left him naked on the street, that within 5 years he would be a millionaire again. Now, did you hear what I said?
Yeah, I heard.
Because the greatness is between your ears, not in your pocket.
Well, I think it's just he humbles all of us. How's that? Because what he's accomplished, and I saw him in the 1970s when he had gone bust a couple of times and he was working basically as an announcer for his dad. I don't think anyone ever thought that he would be the single king of professional wrestling in America, or the world for that matter. It's just amazing. And Lanny, it must be, coming forward to today, to promote the quantity of wrestling on TV he does, the workload must be just absolutely extraordinary.
Yes, and believe it or not, I still enjoy ancillary ramifications of this success. Now, how do I mean? I know I use big words once in a while, but, like the Genius gimmick was a work, but as a matter of fact, like, for example, WrestleMania 25, a promoter pays me to fly to Toronto, where I go to Etobicoke, which is a suburb of Ontario, and I am paid to meet, greet, and be nice to sign autographs for the people of Boston Pizza, because they've got the pay-per-view of WrestleMania 25. And they give me quite a handsome payday to do this. And I'm thinking to myself, here I am at the age of 54, and then the very next week, I go to Cherry Hill, New Jersey, where I'm at a fan fest. And then in 2 weeks, I'm going to Halifax, Nova Scotia, to impersonate a wrestler. And then the next day, they're flying me out to Philadelphia from Halifax, and I'm going to be at another fan fest. The thing is, I'm yesterday's news, but I'm still in demand. And because I have this website, and it's catching on, and I've got PayPal, people are still buying my books, my pictures, my autographs, my stuff. I was in a movie, and they're buying the DVD, and I still get offers to go places, and if the price is right, I'll be there tonight. In the meantime, I'm very grateful to Vince McMahon for giving me some measure of celebrity so I can still feast on it many years down the road.
And your website, of course, is LannyPoffo.com. Very nice
Right,
website.
It's a hard name to spell, Lanny like Fanny, Poffo.com. I was on the Jonathan Ross show in England, and he called me Lenny, and I said, no, it's Lanny like Fanny. Oh, you can't say that on the telly. Did you know that was a bad word in England?
Did I know?
Well, it's kind of like the C word.
Oh.
So in America, Fanny is something you sit on. In England, it's a little more toward the front.
Lanny, you talked about the 1989 and the steroids, and I remember you at that point in time, and you really looked good, as everybody does on steroids, right? And it looked like you were really ready to finally take off. Most of the other guys obviously were doing some form of drugs at that point, and maybe still today, who knows. But were you tempted, the money you could have made over the next few years, or what? You talked about it earlier, but what went through your mind on that decision?
Well, I didn't like the size of my testicles, to tell you the truth. They were shrinking.
Oh, boy.
Okay? Because, see, your body's like a child, okay? If you make my bed every day, guess what I never do? Learn to make my own bed, right?
Yeah.
If you show me how to make my own bed, and then demand that I do it, and take away some of my privileges if I don't do it, then I might cooperate with you, right? Because there's something in it for me. But if you're going to make my bed every day, why should I bother? Well, if you're going to artificially inject testosterone into your body, what is the role of the testicles? The testicles say, hey, looks like there's enough testosterone, let's not make any more. And then pretty soon, when something doesn't work, it gets smaller. That's where the shrinkage comes in. Well, I didn't like the look of that, okay? So what happens is I quit cold turkey, so my body went through a slump of not making my own testosterone, but then eventually I got back. The other thing is also acne vulgaris. I had getting bad skin from the steroids. So what I said on Hannity and Combs, but they interrupted me, I thought it was pretty funny. I said, as you can see, my face is cleared up, and you just have to take my word for the other.
Did the steroids make you more aggressive?
Yes, it did. However, I was never a threat to myself or others. So if the question you're asking me is, do I think steroids killed Chris Benoit and his family? No. Any more than if I get drunk and drive and kill you. No, I still did it, and it was still my fault. Whether I was over-caffeinated or on steroids, you're still guilty of murder, okay? And the victims are still dead. So did it make me more aggressive? Yeah, it definitely, there's something to that.
Lanny, let's talk about the Chris Benoit situation for a second. I think it's almost been portrayed that he came home and just started to kill his wife. I mean, I'm sure there were a lot of other circumstances and maybe a serious argument, issues, and things got out of control, and that led to the whole horrible chain of events. I agree, obviously a murderer and whatever, but sometimes it seemed to me very simplistic the way they presented it on TV, Nancy Grace and some of the other shows, where he took the steroids, he came home, he killed the wife, his poor son, and they didn't really give it any more thought than that. What do you think?
Well, they use it as an opportunity to kill wrestling because they're jealous of the fact that they have a show where they have talking heads and they can't understand why more people watch wrestling than their talking head show. Okay, so they figured let's number one, short term, take advantage by having a bunch of wrestlers on and put them in the hot seat and have our ratings go up. And the other one is let's kill wrestling. And that way we won't have the competition. Now, if you appeal to the classes, you'll live with the masses. If you appeal to the masses, you'll live with the classes. Wrestling has a wide, especially the demographic of 18 to 35 male. They have a wide, that's a very lucrative market. So I believe that they were, they think they're too good for wrestling, but yet wrestling refuses to go away and remains a juggernaut in the ratings. They cannot compete, so if they can't rule, they will ruin. And, of course, their attempt to ruin it is like a fly crawling up an elephant's leg with sexual assault on his mind.
Okay. But, Lanny, at the same time, the other side of the story, you were only on steroids for a short period of time, and they had such a negative reaction on you that you decided to forego what could have been a very lucrative career as a main eventer and stop taking them. So there are two sides to this. The side effects must be equal for the other guys as well, or worse, or maybe a little better.
Right. Well, I feel that I regret having done it. I did get away with it, and I was smart to quit no matter how long I could have been on top. And by the way, they don't just give it to the guy with the most muscles. Okay, these decisions happened in rooms, and you never know who's going to get the push. In my opinion, the least talented fellow that ever did get a huge push is Bam Bam Bigelow. That's just my opinion. Evidently, somebody must have liked him. I did not. There is not a way in the world I would pay money to buy a ticket to see Bam Bam Bigelow. On the other hand, there were many wrestlers that I would pay to see. I could name names. I thought that Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker had one hell of a match at WrestleMania. And they're getting closer. I don't know how old they are. I think they're both about 10 years or so younger than me. I mean, they were doing some magnificent, daring things. So, but this is my opinion. This sport of wrestling is not a sport. It's an exhibition, not a competition. That's why there should never be any wagering. People said, who do you think is going to win? I said, whoever they want to win. It's like, this isn't baseball, football, or bowling where the best man always wins.
Lanny, but in 1989 and 1990, the steroids were very important to who was on top. Later on, things would change after Vince's trial. But at that point in time, look at the push the Ultimate Warrior got, whether it deserved or not. A lot of it was, if he hadn't been on allegedly been on steroids, he wouldn't have probably gotten that push, right?
Right. Now, what they were doing, they were building me up as the genius. And let me tell you how I got my push with Hulk Hogan. He, wrestled whoever he wanted to wrestle. For example, he never wrestled Ravishing Rick Rude. He never wrestled Jake the Snake. Did you ever ask yourself why not?
You tell me.
Well, I never really knew either. But all I know is he wrestled Kamala. He wrestled the Macho Man. And then he chose, in other words, he had enough power to choose his own opponents. Okay, so when I started becoming the genius and everything, he is watching me in action, and he sees what I was trying to do. Then he gets me to the side and he says, Lanny, I love what you're doing. He says, you're starting to be a little effeminate. I said, you want me to stop that? He says, no, I want you to do it more. And that's when I started doing it more. And if you watch the match of Hulk against the Genius on my website in the video section, when he scratched me on the back, he yelled at me, now sell it like Jim Barnett.
Oh, boy.
And, and that was an openly gay promoter.
Right.
So I went, oh my God. Oh, I started running around the ring,
Did you
So it's actually Hulk Hogan that fell in love with the Genius gimmick enough to decide that that's who I want to work with. Not Jake the Snake and not Ravishing Rick Rude, but the Genius. And he had an idea that he would mock me in the ring and get a big pop from the audience in the same manner that he used to mock Sensational Sherry. See, he had a mind for the business of comedy, too, that if I would play the fool, he would kick my butt and play the bigger, and imitate me. And he was right. It worked.
Did you wrestle a tag team with Mr. Perfect on a Saturday Night Main Event?
Yes, it's also on my website. It's actually Mr. Perfect and the Genius against Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan.
Right. Okay.
And after Hulk defeated me, then we rode out of the ring, and then Warrior and Hulk got into an argument, and that built it up as the beginning of the build-up for WrestleMania 6.
See, I remember that, and at that point in time, you were one of the sharpest professional wrestlers in the country. I remember being surprised myself, the quality of the matches you were having, and you were right at the top of your game.
Well, I appreciate that. I get credit for inventing the moonsault, where the truth of the matter is that around 1983, I had the opportunity to see a tape of Tiger Mask against the Dynamite Kid.
Wow, yeah.
And I saw Tiger Mask do a moonsault. And I said, hey, I bet you I could do a moonsault. If they didn't call it a moonsault there, I said, I bet you I could do a backflip off the top rope where you land on the guy. I didn't know a name for it, right? Yeah. So anyway, when I became the Genius, I just call it the honor roll because I thought that was a cool name for a guy that claimed to be a genius.
Yeah. Now, right about after this match, your push ended. Is that correct? Is that when you went off the steroids?
Yeah, but I'll tell you what. It wasn't because of that, okay? It was, I don't think you could, I think it would have happened anyway. There's people on steroids that never got a push. There are people that don't take steroids that got a push. Andre never took a steroid, but he was born that way. See what I mean?
Yeah.
So I see what you're trying to get me to say, but I'm not going to say it. Only because the guy that was in love with me was Hulk Hogan, not Vince. And that's the reason that my push ended. Because when Hulk left to make bad movies, I was then just another one of the guys without the the power of Hulk Hogan behind me.
Well, I'm really not trying to get you to say Vince because I think that Vince has been unfairly blamed for the steroids. Crockett had the Road Warriors. To me, they looked like they were enhanced. All the promoters had guys who were taking drugs. And I think to just blame Vince, it's being done because he has the money. What I'm really asking you, look, Lanny, to have the look with a TV promotion is an important thing because the cameras are right on top of you. If you're just performing at the arenas, the people are so far back, they might not see the loss of, muscle density.
Right.
So with Vince, had created such a TV promotion that it was important that the guys had the look, at least up until that point.
Yeah, but I'll tell you something about steroids. There's a reason that people take them. They work. Boy, do they ever. They work and they work fast. But when you get off of them, you lose what you gained quickly, you're going to lose quickly.
They work in reverse.
Oh, yes. And as a matter of fact, they work in reverse so much that you would have had a better physique if you had never started. And if anybody's considering it, please don't. Okay? If I can say one thing we did good in this interview besides entertain people is Lanny says, I tried it, you can't win. It's a fool's paradise.
Yeah. So, Lanny, when you saw that you were not only losing what you had gained, but then you were even going further back, you must have been alarmed by that, right?
Well, I kind of knew it would happen, and I just kept working out, and I say, well, this is my body, and I'm going to do with it, if you play, you must pay, and I was paying the price for my folly. I was ridiculous to think that I could get away with it, and yet, you understand, after being a jabroni so long, and wanting to succeed so much, I understand why somebody might grab a shortcut.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I finally grabbed it.
And for a moment there, Lanny, you were one of the main stars of the World Wrestling Federation. I think it's kind of forgotten, but like you said, head-to-head with Hulk Hogan on NBC, that tag team match that led to the huge feud between Hogan and Warrior, NBC. I mean, who even thought in the 1970s that there would be professional wrestling on NBC? You would never think that could happen.
And then who would have thought that I would be in it? Like I said, people ask me all the time, am I jealous of Randy's success? And I'm telling you, I wouldn't have even been in New York if it wasn't for Randy. I wouldn't have got to the World Wrestling Federation. So blaming Randy, getting mad at, that would be like, it's like if I have a lifeboat and I'm chipping away at it because I'd rather drown.
Right.
This is, how do you think I got to the World Wrestling Federation? They wanted him. Nobody even knew who I was. I think Vince saw a tape of Randy with Dr. D. David Schultz where Schultz was knocking the World Wrestling Federation, so he wanted to get his hand on it. So Jimmy Hart found the tape, and then he played it, and while he was looking at Dr. D. David Schultz, Vince said, look at that guy, and Macho Man was jumping off the top rope onto the floor, acting like a crazed maniac, and Vince says, that guy's good. And then they brought him in, and the rest is history.
Yeah, and of course, Randy became just an amazing star in professional wrestling. There's a lot of questions I'd like to ask you about him. Lanny, let me pause here. Lanny, are you tired? Do you need a break, or do you want to do another time?
No, I'm okay. I'm okay. Let's do it.
Let's keep going? Okay.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot we've been talking for an hour, 18 minutes. Do you need water or anything?
Well, maybe we can do it again in a few weeks, but
let's do it, Lanny.
I'm kind of busy. I'm kind of like in a situation where I'm not going to be home.
Lanny, let's do this. I'm going to edit this part out we're talking right now. Let's finish it up, and then let's do a second part because there's a lot of questions I want to ask you about WCW and stuff like that, but it's going to be too much to do it today.
Okay.
Fair enough?
Yeah, we'll do it another time then.
Okay, but let me finish the interview. I'm gonna come back. 3, 2, 1. Okay, Lanny, we're going to wind up part 1 of this interview. We are going to have a part 2 because there's a lot of things I want to ask you about the World Wrestling Federation, WCW, few things about your brother. Lanny, what are you doing today besides the occasional wrestling appearance?
Oh, what I do is I do a lot of charity work, okay? For example, I go to the schools, and you'll see in LannyPoffo.com, that I'm on the Speakers Bureau, and I go to I do a lot of work for DARE, which is an organization for drugs, for the children to educate themselves. Basically I just accept bookings, and thanks to PayPal, because people were too lazy to send checks, now they're just ordering my book and pictures with PayPal. And one of the reasons that it does so well is because I take the time to personally autograph each one.
Very good. Now, you've written 3 books?
No, just 2.
2, okay.
Wrestling with Rhyme and Limericks from the Heart and Lungs. One's about wrestling, the other is about smoking.
And you're a very hardcore anti-smoking advocate, correct?
Yes, and even though I'm a divorced man, I have a daughter who's going to be 25 May 29th, and she doesn't smoke, and that makes 100% of my progeny that is non-smoking. That makes me Lanny, the non-smoking dad, 100% clean as far as my progeny. One for one.
Fantastic. Okay, it's www.lannypoffo.com. Lanny, it's been a pleasure. We're going to come back with you in a few weeks. I know you're busy, you're making a lot of appearances, but I got a lot of questions. Again, I'd like to ask you, maybe you can take us inside what happened at WCW and some of the other things as well. Lanny, again, thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Gary.
Have a good day. Thank you so much.
All right.